Language is hugely important to me. Newspaper headlines from Daily Worker, Morning Star, or whatever other newspapers I was looking at, they struck a chord. You grow up with that. You're not particularly thinking about it, but it's just sort of part of your life. I make art and it's what's on my pathway and journey. That is me. And someone did say to me, don't we all do that? And I thought, I don't know if you all do. I know I do. This space is my sanctuary, which is probably called a studio. Typically, I'm using text a lot in my work, taking certain phrases and rework them and present them in other forms. Holding and left holding. It's not a political statement. I made a lenticular postcard with a print in Berlin, moves with left and holding left. And essentially it's a deeply existential question, as opposed to, you can read it with the politics of holding left, keeping left. But for me, it's about what are we all left holding after, whether it was Brexit, whether it's COVID, whether you lose someone. And the cards go out, they're distributed as 500 sent out across the world. A painting that said, "Whisper Comrade." My father said, I don't think I whispered that in my life. I said, well, it depends which country you came from, whether you'd be shouting out comrade or you might be whispering it, whether you might live or whether you might not live. And the text always has double meanings for me. I created a card that says, "Come the revolution." It was a phrase that we grew up with in the 80s, a little fist, "Come the revolution." But I remade that into a screen print and a postcard which says, "Come, revolution." And that completely alters the meaning. Come the revolution, we'll see what happens. And so I love to play with what appear to be very simple words, but they're always turning and twisting. Being part of the Art360 project's been a huge affirmation of my absolute commitment to professionalism, to my further development as an artist. In the archive, first and foremost, we would say there's a lot of prints, and that would be in screen printing, etching, photo etching, lithography. Mostly I've made them all in the Edinburgh printmakers. If I was interested, I tried to find people who might teach me, whether that was in drawing or painting or latterly going to the Lee School of Art to develop drawing skills, which seemed hugely important. Drawing teaches you to look, and that's how I function actually, because I'm constantly looking. I was clearly drawing at the age of 6 as I've made screen prints from my sketchbook. So you don't know until someone else is in your studio taking work out and laying it out in such a way and feeling, I was very interested in feeling rather protective of it. Be careful. But there was the exposure of, wow, there's a lot of work here. It spanned a lot of years. And in those lots of years, whether it's personal things that have happened, the work's connected with one's development as a human being, I think. So I came across this piece of writing, and I think it seemed highly pertinent to the project. It was about faith in the creative process and in the dynamics of emergence. The dynamics of emergence, I really like that. The archive building has been a deeply dynamic in what is emerging from it, and the values and purposes that transcend past achievements and past forms. And it suggests that it's the precondition of all further growth. Well, that's absolutely would be spot on for me. The camera, I probably had one since I was about 10 or 11, snapping family or donkey at the seaside. Daily life, journeys and travels, really. So the camera's been a companion for me. I don't journal. Working with my camera, I'd set up little mini scenes using, whether it was an action man or a Barbie. I found a little duckling stuffed in France one year. That's appeared in little photo shoots. Humour is important to me, and I had a tremendous idea of using an action man and Scotland's national dish, which is beef mince, and I created a series of Cibachrome photographs, which is called Head Full of Mince, or the Scottish expression would be your head's full of mince, and it actually means that you've got a whole load of nonsense up in your head. But this series of photographs, our action man emerges from a big dish of raw mince with the mince on his head. And I liked the idea of the action man in his, I think he's in his underpants with, he's got the mince on his head. And I make them because I have a laugh, actually. I think that's just, that's really important. And I may share them, or they might just be deeply private. I've not made it very public. I don't do a lot of commissioned family portraiture, but I've done some, and it's very important to create the very essence of the person. I mean, my early work, if we go back to that, I didn't have a sitter, I didn't have clippings, I wasn't following something from a book. Quite a lot of the work was just how it appeared. Male type figures with very little hair, but with no particular age. It was very interesting. Kind of bruised youth, I call one. Sort of lived in little faces. And then later, with the learning more and more and the skills in the painting, creating likeness was important if I took on a commission. The screen print portraiture, which was me working essentially from my photograph, but I usually only photographed people, A, that I knew, so I didn't have to deal with copyright issues, and that I could make a very simple, candid photograph. Mick McGahey had been a family friend. I was able to photograph him on one of his last miners' gala days in Edinburgh in the 90s, and then created photo etching, which was then purchased by the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. I created a portrait of Sally Beamish, who's a modernist composer, musician. Again, we had a connection. I was able to photograph her in a non-academic kind of setting, really, and then create a screen print, which was also purchased by the Scottish National Portrait Gallery. Nature's been very important to me. Nature and the environment, whether I'm screen printing on Hessian sacks or when I'm not in my studio in Edinburgh, we made a big move to the edge of the city, quite near Ian Hamilton Finley's garden at Little Sparta, in fact. And in this garden space of a fifth of an acre, I created a spiral. Essentially, I've cut an expansive lawn into a grass spiral space, which I've tended to for 21 years now. So this has been an interesting development for me of using where I live and the land to make my art. I'm not thinking I'm going out making an art piece. I work at the spiral sometimes as it's absolute exercise. It's very physical. But it's taken on a whole new meaning for me. I've increasingly been thinking about the spiral. There's Jungian symbolism about it. Sound's really important to me. It's not like I play masses of sound in my studio. If anything, I play a Jake Tilson CD, which is found sounds. Ears open, like eyes open, drawing, listening and listening what's just out there. It feels like it's part of my practice. From visiting Berlin when the Reichstag was wrapped, I took a Super 8 camera and a Sony Walkman with 4 cassettes, and I shot some film on Super 8, and I recorded the sounds around the Reichstag and created a little film called The Reichstag Rap, and used the sounds, which was kind of like a circus, completely uncut on anything. Out of this project, the 360 Inventory Archive, been talking to sound recording people to make a sound of the archive based on some of my conversations with the curator and some sort of soundscape. You know, when I play the sounds I record, it's not necessarily that I go back to that space, but I think it's an interesting one then to think about, what is the sound and connected with memory then? Well, I'll leave that open for the time being. I'll let everyone else ponder that.